The snow-covered treehouse, perched 30 feet above the Montana wilderness, looked like something from a fairy tale, but Sarah Chen knew fairy tales were lies. 8 months pregnant and 3 weeks from eviction, she clutched the inheritance letter with trembling fingers as wind howled through the towering pines. The great aunt she'd never heard of had left her this place, complete with solar panels, a working kitchen, and heat that actually functioned. But when Sarah descended into the cellar to check the generator, her flashlight beam caught something impossible. Gold bars stacked floor to ceiling, their surfaces gleaming beneath a thin layer of frost. $265 million worth, according to the faded manifest tucked behind them. What Sarah didn't know was that she wasn't just a struggling waitress from Seattle. Her real father had been Marcus Chen, a legendary art recovery specialist who'd spent decades tracking Nazi gold stolen during World War II. The same gold now sitting in her cellar, the same gold that 3 different criminal organizations would torture and kill for. But who was the mysterious great aunt, and why had she chosen Sarah to inherit this deadly treasure? Sarah's breath came in sharp puffs as she stood frozen in the underground chamber, her pregnant belly pressing against the wooden ladder she'd just descended. The flashlight shook in her grip, casting dancing shadows across the metallic fortress before her. Each gold bar bore strange markings, some with eagle emblems, others with numbers she couldn't decipher. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her shock. She pressed her free hand to her stomach, trying to process what she was seeing. Just this morning, she'd been counting quarters for gas money, praying her ancient Honda would make it the 300 miles from Seattle to this remote Montana property. Now she stood in front of enough wealth to solve every problem she'd ever had. The manifest crackled as she unfolded it with trembling fingers. The paper felt ancient, brittle with age and cold. Most of the text was in German, but she could make out dates from the 1940s and lists of numbers that seemed to correspond to the bars stacked before her. At the bottom, in faded English handwriting, someone had written, "For Sarah, when the time comes. Trust no one until you know the truth about Marcus. Marcus. The name meant nothing to her. Her mother had always claimed Sarah's father was a college boyfriend who'd disappeared before Sarah was born, never even providing a name. Now, staring at this cryptic message, Sarah felt the foundation of everything she thought she knew beginning to crack. Above her, the treehouse creaked in the wind. She needed to get back upstairs, needed to think this through rationally. But as she turned toward the ladder, something else caught her eye. A metal filing cabinet tucked into the corner, nearly hidden behind the gold stacks. Sarah squeezed between the precious metal and the stone wall, her belly making the passage difficult. The cabinet's top drawer opened with surprising ease, revealing manila folders thick with documents. She pulled out the first file, and her breath caught. It was labeled Sarah Chen, Protection Protocols. Inside were photographs of her at different ages. As a child on her first day of school, as a teenager working at the local grocery store, recent photos of her outside her Seattle apartment. Someone had been watching her entire life. The second folder contained newspaper clippings about art theft, stolen Nazi treasure, and recovery operations spanning decades. In several articles, the name Marcus Chen appeared highlighted in yellow. The photos showed an Asian man with kind eyes and Sarah's same stubborn chin standing beside recovered paintings and ancient artifacts. A loose note fell from the folder, written in the same handwriting as the manifest. "Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and the protection I could offer has ended. Your father died trying to return stolen treasures to their rightful owners. Some very dangerous people believe you know where the rest is hidden. You don't, yet. But they won't believe that. The gold in this room is just the beginning. Everything Marcus died protecting is now your responsibility. There's a phone in the kitchen drawer already programmed. When you're ready to learn the truth, call the only number saved, but be certain, once you make that call, there's no going back to your old life. Aunt Margaret." Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank onto the cold stone floor, folders scattered around her. 8 months pregnant, broke and alone, and now apparently the heir to a fortune that came with a death sentence. The wind above grew stronger, rattling the treehouse structure. But underneath the natural sounds, Sarah heard something else, the distant rumble of vehicles approaching through the forest. Her blood turned to ice. According to the GPS, she was 15 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by an overgrown logging trail. No one should know she was here. No one, except whoever had been watching her all these years. The drive to Millbrook took 3 hours through winding back roads that Sarah's ancient Honda Civic protested with every pothole. Emma had fallen asleep in the back seat 20 minutes in, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the rhythmic thrum of tires on asphalt. The lawyer's office had been a cramped affair above a barber shop, smelling of aftershave and old paper. Mr. Henley, a man whose bow tie seemed to be the most exciting thing about him, had peered at Sarah over wire-rimmed glasses with barely concealed bewilderment. "You're certain you're Sarah Elizabeth Chen?" he'd asked for the 3rd time, consulting his documents. "Sarah Elizabeth Morrison now," she'd corrected. Though the divorce papers were still so fresh, the ink felt wet. "Chen was my mother's maiden name." "Ah, yes. That explains the confusion." He'd shuffled through his papers with the enthusiasm of someone handling dirty laundry. "Your great-aunt Millicent Chen was quite specific in her instructions. The property is to go to Sarah Elizabeth Chen, blood relative upon her death, no other conditions." Sarah had stared at the deed, the legal language swimming before her tired eyes. She'd never heard of Millicent Chen, despite the woman apparently being her maternal grandmother's sister. Family trees were complicated when half the branches had been burned away by old grudges and older secrets. Now, as she turned onto Oakwood Lane, Sarah wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The neighborhood looked like something from a postcard that had been left in the rain too long. Large houses sat on generous lots, their bones good but their skin showing age. Mature oaks lined the street, their bare November branches reaching toward the grey sky like arthritic fingers. Number 47 was a 2-story colonial painted a faded yellow that might have been cheerful once. The shutters hung at tired angles and the front porch sagged like a frown. But it was a house, a real house, with a front door that was hers to open and rooms that were hers to fill. Sarah parked in the cracked driveway and gently shook Emma awake. Her daughter's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and cranky from her nap. "Where are we, Mama?" "Our new home, baby." Emma pressed her face to the window, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with the adaptability that Sarah both envied and worried about in her 5-year-old. Too much change, too much upheaval. But what choice did they have? The key Mr. Henley had given her turned easily in the front door lock, as if the house had been waiting for them. Inside, dust motes danced in the afternoon light, filtering through yellowed curtains. The furniture was old but solid. A burgundy sofa that had seen better decades, a dining room table that could seat 8, built-in bookshelves lined with volumes that looked like they'd never been disturbed. "It smells funny," Emma announced, wrinkling her nose. "Just old house smell. We'll open some windows." They explored room by room, Sarah's spirits lifting despite herself. 3 bedrooms upstairs, 1.5 baths, a kitchen that was dated but functional. The basement was dry, the roof looked sound from the inside, and the heating system coughed to life when she found the thermostat. It was Emma who discovered the back door that led to the yard, and it was Emma who spotted the treehouse. "Mama, look, there's a castle in the tree." Sarah followed her daughter's pointing finger through the kitchen window. In the far corner of the backyard, nestled in the branches of an enormous oak tree, sat what could generously be called a treehouse. It was more like a small cabin that had somehow grown among the limbs, complete with shingled walls, real windows, and what looked like electrical lines running up the trunk. "Can we go see it?" "Please, Mama, please." Sarah studied the structure through the glass. It looked solid enough, though she'd want to check it out thoroughly before letting Emma play there. The last thing they needed was a trip to the emergency room in a town where they didn't even know where the hospital was located. "Tomorrow, sweetheart. It's getting dark, and we need to bring our things in from the car." They spent the evening making the house livable. Sarah had brought sheets, towels, and enough groceries for a few days. Emma claimed the smallest bedroom as hers, delighted by the window seat that looked out over the backyard. From there, the treehouse was perfectly visible, its dark windows reflecting the last light of day. As Sarah tucked Emma into her makeshift bed, her daughter's voice was drowsy but excited. "Do you think the tree castle has furniture in it?" "I don't know, baby. We'll find out tomorrow." But as Sarah stood at Emma's window later that night, staring out at the treehouse silhouetted against the star-filled sky, she found herself wondering the same thing. What exactly had Great-Aunt Millicent left them? And why did she have the strangest feeling that someone was watching from those dark windows? The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the treehouse windows as Sarah ran her fingers along the splintered floorboards, still trying to process what lay beneath. The frozen bundle felt surreal, like something from a fever dream rather than her new reality. She'd managed to pry up 3 more boards, revealing what appeared to be a metal container wrapped in multiple layers of plastic sheeting, all coated in a thin layer of frost, despite the mild October weather. Emma's voice drifted up from below. "Mom, can I come up yet? I'm bored." "Just a few more minutes, sweetheart," Sarah called back, her voice strained. She quickly repositioned the loose boards, covering the hiding spot. Whatever this was, she needed time to think before involving Emma. As she climbed down the rope ladder, her mind raced. The container looked deliberately hidden, not accidentally lost. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to conceal it beneath the treehouse floor. But who? And why was it frozen solid in weather that barely required a jacket? Emma bounced on her toes near the base of the oak tree. "Is it safe now? Can we go up together?" "Tomorrow," Sarah promised, forcing a smile. "It's getting late and we should head back to check on the house." They walked back through the overgrown yard, Emma chattering about the treehouse, while Sarah barely heard a word. The Victorian house loomed before them, its gabled roof and wraparound porch somehow more imposing than welcoming in the fading light. She fumbled with the antique key the lawyer had given her, finally managing to unlock the heavy front door. Inside, dust motes danced in the slanted sunbeams streaming through tall windows. The house felt frozen in time, as if Aunt Millicent had simply vanished mid-activity. A half-finished crossword puzzle lay on a side table, reading glasses folded neatly beside it. A teacup sat on the kitchen counter, a delicate film of mold floating on the surface of whatever liquid remained. "This place smells weird." Emma wrinkled her nose. "Old house smell," Sarah murmured, though she noticed something else underlying the mustiness, something sharp and chemical that made her uneasy. While Emma explored the downstairs rooms, Sarah found herself drawn to a collection of framed photographs on the mantelpiece. Most showed a stern-looking woman she assumed was Millicent, but one stood out. A much younger Millicent with a man Sarah didn't recognize, both of them standing beside what looked like a laboratory. The man wore a white coat, and behind them, Sarah could make out shelves lined with bottles and equipment. "Mom, look!" Emma's voice echoed from the kitchen. "There's a cellar door!" Sarah hurried to find Emma tugging at a heavy wooden door set into the kitchen floor. "Don't, Em. We don't know what's down there." "But what if there's treasure?" The word treasure sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "We'll explore tomorrow. Right now we need to find somewhere to stay for the night." They drove into the nearest town, a sleepy place called Millbrook that seemed to consist of a main street, a diner, and a small motel that had seen better decades. Sarah checked them into a room with 2 beds, grateful for the normalcy of cable TV and clean sheets, even if the carpet had mysterious stains and the air conditioning unit rattled like a dying animal. After Emma fell asleep, Sarah sat by the window, staring out at the neon motel sign and trying to make sense of the day. She pulled out her phone and searched for information about Millicent Hartwell, but found almost nothing. Just an obituary that mentioned her work as a private researcher and her reclusive lifestyle. A soft knock at the door made her freeze. It was nearly midnight, and she hadn't told anyone where they were staying. "Mrs. Chen?" The voice was unfamiliar, male, with a slight accent she couldn't place. I'd like to speak with you about your inheritance. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She crept to the door and peered through the peephole, seeing a tall man in a dark coat standing under the harsh motel lighting. His face was partially shadowed, but she could see pale skin and sharp cheekbones. "How did you find us?" she whispered through the door. "Small town, only one motel." His tone was conversational, almost friendly. "I represent certain parties who had business dealings with your great-aunt. There are some items that need to be returned. I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." The friendliness vanished from his voice. The treehouse was always her favorite hiding place. Very sentimental, but not very clever. Sarah backed away from the door, her mouth dry. This stranger knew about the treehouse, knew about whatever was hidden there, which meant Millicent's death might not have been as natural as everyone assumed. "We can discuss this civilly," the man continued, "or I can wait until you return tomorrow. Your choice, Mrs. Chen. But one way or another, I will retrieve what belongs to my employers." The lockbox felt heavier than it looked, its metal surface cold against Sarah's palms as she carried it back to the treehouse. Her hands trembled, whether from the autumn chill or anticipation she couldn't tell. Emma had fallen asleep in the car during the drive home, exhausted from their adventure, giving Sarah time to think about what she'd discovered. Inside the treehouse, afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Sarah set the box down carefully and stared at it, her heart hammering. The brass lock was old but solid, and she had no key. She'd need bolt cutters or a locksmith, but something told her this wasn't the kind of discovery you shared with strangers. A sound outside made her freeze, footsteps on gravel. Sarah peered through the window and saw a black sedan pulling into her driveway. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, looking distinctly out of place in her modest neighborhood. He was tall, maybe 50, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that suggested he was used to getting his way. Sarah's pulse quickened. She grabbed the lockbox and shoved it into the storage compartment where she'd found it, her movements quick and silent. By the time the man reached her front door, she was climbing down from the treehouse, trying to look casual. The doorbell rang as she entered through the back door. Emma stirred on the couch but didn't wake. Sarah smoothed her hair, wiped her dusty hands on her jeans, and answered the door. "Miss Chen?" The man's smile was polished but didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Robert Blackwood from Blackwood and Associates. I represent certain interests regarding your recent inheritance." "I'm sorry, what interests?" Sarah kept her hand on the door, ready to close it. "May I come in?" "It's regarding the property you inherited from Evelyn Morrison." The name hit her like a slap. "How do you know about that?" "Estate matters become public record, Miss Chen. My clients have a legitimate concern about the property." His gaze shifted past her, taking in her modest living room, the stack of unpaid bills on the coffee table. "They're prepared to make you a very generous offer. The property isn't for sale." Blackwood's smile widened. "Perhaps you should hear the offer before deciding. $100,000 cash for the land and any structures on it. No inspections, no contingencies. We could close by the end of the week." Sarah's breath caught. 100,000 would solve everything. Emma's school fees, the mortgage, the crushing weight of debt that kept her awake at night. But something about this man, his timing, the way he kept glancing toward the backyard, set off every alarm bell in her head. "Who are your clients?" "I'm afraid that's confidential, but I assure you, they're serious buyers with serious money." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Think about it. That's more than the assessed value of the property, considerably more." Sarah took the card with numb fingers. The address was downtown, expensive district. "Why so much? It's just a small lot with an old treehouse." Something flickered across Blackwood's face. Surprise, maybe annoyance, before the professional mask slipped back into place. "My clients have sentimental reasons. They prefer not to see old properties developed inappropriately." It was a lie. Sarah could hear it in his voice, see it in the way his eyes kept darting toward the windows. "I need time to think about it, of course. But I should mention, my clients are hoping to finalize this quickly. The offer stands until Friday. 3 days. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. After Blackwood left, Sarah stood at the window watching his sedan disappear down the street. Her hands were shaking again. She pulled out her phone and Googled Blackwood and Associates. The website was sleek and professional, but vague about what kind of law they practiced. Corporate transactions, acquisitions, discrete problem-solving. The kind of firm that charged $1,000 an hour. Emma wandered into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Mom? Who was that man?" "Just someone about the house, honey. Are you hungry?" As she made Emma a snack, Sarah's mind raced. A mysterious inheritance from a great aunt she'd never heard of. A lockbox hidden in a treehouse. And now a lawyer showing up within days, offering serious money for property that should have been worthless. Whatever was in that box, someone else knew about it. Someone with resources and urgency. That evening, after Emma went to bed, Sarah sat in the treehouse with a flashlight and a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters she'd found in the garage. The lock was old but stubborn. It took 20 minutes of careful work before it finally gave way with a satisfying click. Sarah lifted the lid with trembling fingers. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, were stacks of cash. Hundreds of bills, maybe thousands. Beneath the money were documents, photographs, and what looked like a ledger filled with dates, names, and numbers. At the bottom of the box was a letter addressed simply to Sarah. The photograph trembled in Sarah's hands as she stared at the face that could have been her own reflection. The woman in the faded color print had the same auburn hair, the same green eyes, even the same stubborn set to her jaw that Emma had inherited. But this woman wore clothes from another era, a flowing peasant dress and beaded jewelry that screamed 1960s counterculture. "Aunt Cordelia," Sarah whispered, reading the spidery handwriting on the back. The date was smudged, but she could make out 1967 and what looked like California. She'd found the photograph tucked inside an old coffee tin, along with a collection of letters tied with a hemp string. The treehouse had revealed more secrets as she'd explored, hidden compartments built into the walls, a small wood-burning stove that explained the chimney, and shelves lined with books on everything from organic farming to revolutionary politics. The letters were addressed to Cordelia Morrison at various addresses across the country. San Francisco, Boulder, a commune in Oregon. Sarah's hands shook as she untied the string and unfolded the first letter. The paper was yellow with age, but the handwriting was clear. "My dearest Cordy," it began. "The situation here is getting dangerous. They know about the photographs, and I think they know about us. If anything happens to me, you have to promise to keep it safe. The world isn't ready for the truth, but someday—" Sarah's heart hammered as she read. The letter was signed M and dated 3 weeks before a date that made her blood run cold. November 22nd, 1963, Dallas. The next letter was in a different hand, frantic and barely legible. "Cordelia, Marcus is dead. They made it look like an accident, but we both know better. You were right to disappear. Whatever he gave you, keep it hidden. They're watching everyone now. Destroy this letter. J." Sarah sank onto the treehouse's built-in bench, her mind reeling. The treehouse wasn't just some hippie retreat, it was a hiding place, and whatever Cordelia had been hiding might still be here. A sound from below made her freeze. Footsteps, definitely human, circling the base of the oak tree. Sarah crept to the window and peered down through the leaves. A man in a dark suit stood at the bottom of the ladder, looking up. Even from this distance she could see he wasn't local, too polished, too urban for rural Oregon. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number. Bring the girl and come down. We need to talk." Sarah's stomach dropped. Emma. Where was Emma? She grabbed the letters and photograph, shoving them into her jacket pocket, and climbed down the ladder as slowly as she dared. The man waited with his hands clasped behind his back, watching her descent with pale, calculating eyes. "Miss Chen," he said when her feet touched the ground. His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't place. "My name is Victor Petrov. I represent certain interested parties. Where's my daughter?" Sarah kept her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. Safe, for now. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Your great-aunt was a very resourceful woman. She managed to stay hidden for 50 years, quite impressive really, but her death has created complications. I don't know what you're talking about. Victor tilted his head, studying her like a specimen under a microscope. I think you do, or you're beginning to. The question is, how much has she told you? How much do you know about what she took? Sarah's mind raced through the letters, the photographs, the careful way Cordelia had constructed this hideaway. Nothing. I never even knew she existed until the lawyer called. Ah, but you've been exploring, haven't you? Found her little time capsule up there? Victor gestured toward the treehouse. Cordelia was sentimental. It was always going to be her downfall. A branch cracked somewhere in the woods behind him. Victor's hand moved inside his jacket, and Sarah caught a glimpse of metal. Here's what's going to happen, he continued, his voice conversational despite the implied threat. You're going to show me everything you found. Every letter, every photograph, every scrap of paper that crazy old woman left behind. And then you're going to help me find what she really hid. And if I refuse? Victor's smile widened. Your daughter is a beautiful child. Emma, isn't it? 10 years old. It would be such a shame if something happened to her. Rage flooded through Sarah, hot and pure. She thought of Emma's laugh, her gap-toothed grin, the way she still reached for Sarah's hand when she was scared. Whatever Cordelia had hidden, whatever dangerous secret she'd spent 50 years protecting, Sarah would burn it all to keep Emma safe. But as she reached for the letters in her pocket, she heard something that made hope flicker in her chest, a car engine getting closer. And unless she was mistaken, it sounded exactly like Detective Morrison's patrol car. The morning light filtered through the treehouse windows as Sarah climbed the rope ladder, her muscles protesting from the previous night's digging. She'd barely slept, her mind churning over the discovery beneath the floorboards. The metal box sat exactly where she'd left it, partially unearthed and gleaming dully in the shadows. Emma was at school, giving Sarah precious hours to investigate without having to explain why Mummy was acting so strange. She'd called in sick to work, knowing Mrs. Patterson would dock her pay, but some things were more important than her minimum wage job at the diner. Sarah knelt beside the hole and resumed digging, using the small gardening spade she'd brought from the shed. The soil was softer now, and within an hour she'd exposed the entire container. It was larger than she'd initially thought, roughly the size of a small suitcase, made of what looked like stainless steel with heavy-duty latches. Her hands trembled as she worked the latches free. They opened with satisfying clicks that echoed in the small space. Sarah took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Money, stacks and stacks of cash, bound with rubber bands. Her vision blurred as she tried to process what she was seeing. Beneath the bills were documents sealed in plastic bags and something that made her stomach drop, a handgun wrapped in oiled cloth. Sarah's hands shook as she picked up one of the money stacks. The bills were hundreds mostly, with some 50s mixed in. Old bills, but not ancient. She did quick mental math on just the visible stacks and arrived at a number that made her dizzy. There had to be at least $200,000 here, maybe more. The documents drew her attention next. Inside the plastic, she could make out what looked like legal papers, photographs, and handwritten notes. But it was the gun that made her close the box and sit back on her heels, breathing hard. This wasn't just money someone had saved. This was something else entirely, something dangerous. Her phone buzzed with a text message, making her jump. Unknown number, we need to talk. Meet me at Rosie's Cafe in 1 hour. Come alone. D. Sarah stared at the message, her heart hammering. Who was D? How did they get her number? And more importantly, how did they know she'd found something? She thought about ignoring the message, but another text arrived immediately. I knew your great-aunt. I can explain everything, but we're running out of time. Sarah's mind raced. She could call the police, but and tell them what? That she'd found money and a gun on her own property? That someone was sending her cryptic messages? She had no idea if what she'd found was legal or illegal, if Aunt Millicent had been involved in something criminal, or if this mysterious person was friend or foe. But she needed answers. Sarah carefully closed the metal box and pushed dirt back over it, just enough to conceal it from casual observation. She climbed down from the treehouse and checked all the doors and windows of her house twice before getting in her car. Rosie's Cafe was a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee and pie. Sarah had never been there before, which she suspected was the point. As she pulled into the gravel parking lot, she scanned the handful of vehicles, looking for… what? She had no idea what she was looking for. Inside, the cafe was dimly lit and smelled of bacon grease and coffee. A few patrons sat scattered across the worn vinyl booths. Sarah chose a table near the back where she could see the entrance and ordered coffee from a tired-looking waitress. She didn't have to wait long. The bell above the door chimed, and a man entered, tall, maybe 50, with graying hair and wearing a leather jacket despite the warm weather. His eyes swept the cafe and landed on her with the certainty of someone who knew exactly who they were looking for. He slid into the booth across from her without invitation. "Sarah?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "My name is Detective Ray Morrison, retired." He kept his voice low. "I worked with your great-aunt for 3 years before she disappeared." "Worked with her how?" Sarah managed. "She was helping us build a case against some very dangerous people. People who would kill without hesitation to get back what you found." His eyes were serious, kind but worried. "We faked her death and relocated her when things got too hot, but she never gave up the evidence." Sarah's coffee grew cold as Morrison continued. "The problem is, those dangerous people never stopped looking. And yesterday, we intercepted chatter that suggests they know Millicent is dead and they're closing in on the treehouse. How much time do we have? Maybe a day, probably less." The coffee shop's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Detective Martinez's weathered face as Sarah slid into the booth across from him. She'd chosen a public place deliberately, somewhere she could leave quickly if this conversation went south. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her steaming mug, the ceramic offering little comfort against the chill that had settled deep in her bones since finding that money. "You sounded pretty rattled on the phone," Martinez said, his dark eyes studying her with the same intensity she'd noticed at the treehouse. "What's this about?" Sarah took a shaky breath. She'd rehearsed this moment during the sleepless hours since her encounter with the intruder, but now the words felt clumsy on her tongue. "I need to tell you something about what I found on my property, something I didn't mention before." Martinez leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "Go on." "There's money hidden in the ground near the treehouse. A lot of money." The words tumbled out faster now, as if speaking them quickly might lessen their weight. "I found it by accident when I was trying to figure out the electrical situation. It's wrapped in plastic, buried in what looks like an old cooler." The detective's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the subtle shift in his posture, the way his shoulders tensed, how his fingers stilled around his coffee cup. "How much money are we talking about?" "I don't know exactly. I didn't count it all, but there had to be hundreds of thousands, maybe more." Sarah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And last night someone broke into my house. They didn't take anything valuable. My laptop, Emma's tablet, jewelry, none of that was touched. But they searched everywhere." "Did you report the break-in?" Sarah shook her head, shame heating her cheeks. "I was scared. I didn't know who to trust, and I thought maybe if I just reburied the money and pretended I never found it. But you decided to come to me instead." "Someone else knows about it," Sarah said, meeting his gaze. "And they're willing to break into my house while my daughter sleeps upstairs to find it. I can't protect Emma from something this big on my own." Martinez was quiet for a long moment, processing. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with ordinary life. Students hunched over laptops, business people grabbing quick lunches, an elderly couple sharing a crossword puzzle. Sarah envied them their normalcy, their problems that could be solved with the right word or a successful meeting. "Have you touched the money? Moved it?" I pulled out one bundle to look at it, but I put it back. I tried not to disturb the scene. Sarah hesitated. The bills looked old, not vintage old, but like they'd been there for years. This could be connected to your great-aunt's death, Martinez said slowly. If someone was looking for that money and thought she might have told them where it was. The implication hung between them like a physical thing. Sarah's stomach lurched as the pieces clicked into place. You think someone killed Aunt Evelyn for it? I think we need to get a team out to your property today. Martinez pulled out his phone. And I think you and your daughter need to stay somewhere else tonight. I can't afford a hotel, and I don't really have anyone I can call. The admission stung, highlighting just how isolated she'd become since the divorce. David had systematically alienated her from most of their mutual friends, and her own family was scattered across the country. We'll figure something out. Right now, I need you to show me exactly where you found the money. He stood, dropping a 10 on the table. We're going to treat this as a crime scene until we know otherwise. As they walked toward their cars, Sarah felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. She was no longer alone with this burden, but she'd also just made it real in a way that felt irreversible. There would be police cars at her house, neighbors asking questions, Emma wanting explanations she wasn't sure she could give. "Detective!" she called as he reached his vehicle. What if this makes things worse? What if whoever is looking for that money decides we're too much of a threat? Martinez paused, his hand on the car door. Sarah, the moment you found that money, you became a threat whether you reported it or not. The difference is, now you've got the full resources of the police department watching your back. His words should have been comforting, but as Sarah drove home with his patrol car following behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just painted an even bigger target on herself and Emma. The money had been buried for years, keeping its secrets. Now those secrets were about to be dragged into the light, and she had no idea what else might emerge from the darkness with them. The silence in the treehouse felt suffocating as Sarah stared at the empty space where the metal box had been. Her hands trembled as she ran them through the loose dirt, desperately hoping she'd somehow missed it in the darkness. Nothing. The fortune that could have changed everything for her and Emma was gone. A twig snapped outside. Sarah froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the small window, she caught a glimpse of movement between the trees, a dark figure walking deliberately toward the base of the oak. Panic seized her throat. Whoever had taken the money was coming back. She scrambled toward the rope ladder, but froze when she heard the familiar creak of someone climbing up. Heavy footsteps, methodical and confident. Sarah pressed herself against the far wall, grabbing the only potential weapon she could find, a rusty garden trowel left behind by whoever had dug up the box. The treehouse floor vibrated as someone hauled themselves through the entrance. Sarah held her breath, trowel raised, as a figure emerged from the shadows. Well, well. Sarah Chen. The voice was gravelly, unfamiliar. A man in his 60s stepped into the pale moonlight filtering through the window. He was thin but wiry, with silver hair and cold grey eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of her face. Despite the warm night, he wore a heavy coat that bulged suspiciously at the chest. "You don't know me," he said, settling onto the wooden floor with unsettling casualness. "But I knew your great-aunt very well. Margaret and I had quite a history. You took the money." Sarah's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. The man smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. "Took what's mine, you mean? That fortune has been sitting here for 23 years, waiting for me to come collect it. Margaret thought she was clever, hiding it from me, but I always knew she'd stashed it somewhere on this property." Sarah's mind raced. 23 years ago, you're the one who killed that security guard. Danny Morrison was in the wrong place at the wrong time, just like you are now. The man reached inside his coat, and Sarah caught the glint of metal. "My name's Frank Russo, by the way, since we're getting acquainted." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd read about Frank Russo in the old newspaper articles she'd found online about the armored car robbery. He'd been the inside man, the one who'd given his accomplices the route and timing, but he'd disappeared before the police could arrest him, vanishing along with his share of the stolen money. "The police have been looking for you for over 20 years, Sarah said, hoping to buy time while her mind frantically searched for an escape plan. Frank chuckled. "I've been looking for this money just as long. Your great-aunt cost me everything when she decided to play hero. I had to start over, build a new life, new identity, but I never forgot about my nest egg." His expression darkened. $3.2 million. That's what Margaret stole from me. She didn't steal anything. She found it, and she should have minded her own business. Frank's hand tightened on whatever was concealed in his coat. "But that's ancient history now. The question is, what am I going to do with you?" Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, making them both jump. Frank's eyes narrowed as she slowly reached for it, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Mom?" Emma's sleepy voice drifted through the speaker before Sarah could even say hello. "I heard your car leave. Where are you?" Sarah's blood turned to ice. Frank's smile widened as he registered the child's voice. "Answer her," he whispered, leaning forward. "But choose your words very carefully." Sarah's throat felt like sandpaper. I'm just out running a quick errand, sweetheart." "Go back to sleep. When will you be home?" "I had another bad dream." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. She could picture Emma alone in their apartment, clutching her stuffed elephant, wondering why her mother had abandoned her in the middle of the night. "Soon, baby. Very soon. I love you. Love you too, Mom." The line went dead. Frank studied Sarah's face with predatory interest. "Beautiful daughter you have there. How old is she? 7, 8? Don't." The word came out like a growl. "Don't even think about it. That depends entirely on you." Frank finally revealed what he'd been concealing, a snub-nosed revolver that looked ancient but undoubtedly functional. "See, I've got a problem. I've got my money back, but now I've got a witness. And witnesses make me nervous." Sarah's grip tightened on the trowel, though she knew it would be useless against a gun. "But," Frank continued, "I'm not unreasonable. There might be a way we can work this out. A way that ensures your little girl doesn't wake up tomorrow wondering why Mummy never came home." The forest seemed different now, as if the very trees were watching Sarah with suspicious eyes. She pulled her jacket tighter against the morning chill as she made her way back to the treehouse, the memory of last night's phone call echoing in her mind like a death knell. "We know what you found. Stop digging or face the consequences." Emma had insisted on coming with her, despite Sarah's protests. Her daughter walked slightly behind, kicking at fallen leaves with the forced casualness of someone trying to appear brave. The metal detector felt heavier in Sarah's grip today, though she knew that was just her imagination running wild with fear. "Mom, maybe we should call the police," Emma said for the third time since they'd left the house. Sarah shook her head, though doubt gnawed at her resolve. "And tell them what? That someone called and threatened us? They'll want to know why, and then we'll have to explain about the money." She paused at the base of the treehouse ladder. "Besides, we don't even know if there's really anything down there worth finding." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah knew she was lying to herself. The careful measurements in Aunt Lydia's journal, the detailed sketches of root systems and soil composition, everything pointed to something significant buried beneath the ancient oak, something worth killing for, apparently. The metal detector gave its first promising beep after only 20 minutes of searching. Sarah's heart jumped as the device's tone shifted to the urgent warble that indicated a substantial metallic object below. She marked the spot with a stick and continued her sweep, mapping out what appeared to be a rectangular shape, roughly 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. "It's big," Emma whispered, crouching beside one of the markers. "Mom, what if it's not money? What if it's something else?" Sarah tried not to think about the obvious alternative, something 6 feet long that someone might want to keep buried. She focused instead on Lydia's journal entries, which had mentioned the collection and securing our future. Those didn't sound like the words of someone hiding a crime. The digging proved harder than expected. The roots of the massive oak had created a natural network of barriers, and Sarah found herself having to work around them rather than through them. Emma helped by collecting the smaller rocks they unearthed, creating neat piles that reminded Sarah uncomfortably of grave markers. By noon, they'd excavated nearly 3 feet down across most of the target area. Sarah's hands were raw despite her work gloves, and sweat dripped into her eyes despite the cool air. She was beginning to wonder if she'd misread the metal detector when her shovel struck something that definitely wasn't wood or stone. "Emma, help me clear this section." Together they brushed away the remaining soil to reveal the corner of what appeared to be a metal container. It was dark green, military style, with heavy latches along one visible edge. Sarah's excitement warred with a growing sense of unease as more of the container became visible. "There's writing on it," Emma said, pointing to faded stenciling on the metal surface. Sarah leaned closer, wiping away decades of grime. The letters were barely legible, but she could make out what looked like US Army and a series of numbers below it. Her blood chilled as the implications hit her. "Mom, look." Emma was pointing at something else they'd uncovered. Another container, identical to the first, nestled beside it. As they cleared more soil, the outline of a third became visible. Sarah sat back on her heels, trying to process what they'd found. 3 military containers, buried in a carefully planned location, hidden for what had to be decades. This wasn't someone's personal savings hidden during hard times. This was something much larger, much more dangerous. A branch cracked somewhere in the forest behind them. Sarah spun around, her heart hammering. The woods appeared empty, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed. The threatening phone call suddenly felt much more real, much more immediate. "We need to cover this back up," she said, grabbing her shovel. "Now." "But, Mom." "Now, Emma." They worked frantically to replace the soil over their discovery, Sarah's paranoia growing with every rustling leaf and snapping twig. By the time they finished, the excavation site looked relatively undisturbed, but Sarah knew that wouldn't fool anyone who was specifically looking for signs of digging. As they gathered their tools, Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of heading home, she turned toward town, toward the small public library where she might be able to research military container markings and serial numbers. She needed to know what Lydia had really left her before she decided whether to uncover it again. Because one thing had become crystal clear as she'd stared at those green metal boxes. Whatever lay buried beneath the treehouse was worth far more than money to someone, and that someone was willing to kill to protect it. The sheriff's office felt smaller than Sarah remembered, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across Detective Morrison's weathered face. She sat rigid in the plastic chair, Emma beside her clutching a juice box with white knuckles. "Let me get this straight," Morrison said, flipping through his notepad. "Someone broke into your house, searched it thoroughly, but didn't take anything valuable? Not your laptop, not your jewelry, nothing?" Sarah nodded, stealing a glance at Emma, who had been unusually quiet since they'd arrived. "They were looking for something specific. I'm sure of it. Any idea what that might be?" The weight of the storage unit key in her pocket felt like a lead brick. Sarah had wrestled with this decision all morning, but seeing the fear in Emma's eyes had crystallized her resolve. Some secrets were too dangerous to keep. "There's something I need to tell you about the treehouse," she began. Morrison's pen stopped moving. "Go on." Sarah took a deep breath and told him everything. The hidden compartment, the cash, the gold coins, her growing suspicion that Aunt Matilda's death might not have been natural. She left out only the storage unit, some instinct telling her to hold that card close to her chest. When she finished, Morrison was leaning forward, his casual demeanor replaced by sharp attention. "You're telling me there's over $1 million hidden in a treehouse on your property?" "Was," Sarah corrected. "I moved it somewhere safe after the break-in." "Where?" "I'd rather not say." "Not yet." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Chen, if you're withholding evidence in a potential homicide investigation—" "Homicide?" The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You think someone killed her?" "I think," Morrison said carefully, "that your great-aunt's death is looking less accidental by the hour." He stood up, pacing to the window. Matilda Chen was found at the bottom of those treehouse stairs with a broken neck. At the time it seemed straightforward. Elderly woman takes a fall. But now, with this fortune you've discovered, Emma's juice box hit the floor with a wet splat. Someone killed the tree lady? Sarah pulled her daughter close, shooting Morrison a warning look. "Emma, why don't you go colour in the waiting area? I saw some books out there." After Emma reluctantly left, Morrison continued in a lower voice. "The medical examiner found something odd during the autopsy. Matilda had defensive wounds on her hands, scratches and bruises that suggested a struggle, but there was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of robbery. Because the killer didn't find what they were looking for," Sarah whispered. "Exactly. Which means whoever did this is still out there, still searching. And now they know you have it." A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she remembered the feeling of being watched, the shadow she'd glimpsed through her kitchen window. "What do I do?" "First, you tell me where you've hidden the money. We need to secure it as evidence." Sarah hesitated. Once she revealed the storage unit, she'd lose control entirely. The money would disappear into evidence lockup, possibly for years while lawyers fought over it. Emma's college fund, their ticket out of poverty, would vanish as quickly as it had appeared. "I need time to think. Mrs. Chen, your life could be in danger. Your daughter's life could be in danger." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah thought of Emma sleeping peacefully last night, while a stranger rifled through their belongings just down the hall. Her hands began to shake. "There's something else," Morrison added. "We pulled Matilda's phone records. In the weeks before her death, she made several calls to a private investigator in Portland, guy named Marcus Webb. We're trying to reach him, but his office says he's been unreachable for the past month. What does that mean?" "Could mean nothing. Could mean whoever killed your aunt is tying up loose ends." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number. Stop digging or you'll end up like the old lady." Her blood turned to ice water. With trembling fingers, she showed Morrison the screen. He was on his radio immediately, calling for a trace on the number, requesting additional patrols around Sarah's house. But Sarah barely heard him. The reality of their situation was crashing down on her like an avalanche. Someone had killed Matilda for that money, someone who was still out there, still hunting, someone who now saw Sarah and Emma as obstacles to be eliminated. "We're putting you in protective custody," Morrison announced, ending his radio call. "For how long?" "Until we catch whoever's doing this." Sarah thought about their tiny apartment, Emma's school, the job interview she had scheduled for tomorrow. Their whole life was here, fragile as it was. But their whole life wouldn't matter if they were dead. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll tell you where the money is." Morrison pulled out his notepad. "Pen ready. But first, I want to see this private investigator's files. I want to know what Matilda discovered that got her killed." The ancient floorboards of Detective Morrison's study groaned under Sarah's restless pacing. Outside, the first hints of dawn painted the sky a sickly yellow, matching the fluorescent light that buzzed overhead. Morrison sat hunched over case files, his weathered face etched with concentration as he connected dots on a timeline that stretched back 30 years. "Your great-aunt wasn't just a recluse," Morrison said, tapping his pen against a faded photograph. "Margaret Holloway was a witness to something that got 3 people killed in 1993. Sarah stopped mid-stride, her coffee growing cold in trembling hands. "What kind of witness?" "The kind that sees a county commissioner accept a briefcase full of cash from a development company." Morrison pulled out a manila folder thick with yellowed documents. Holloway Construction was trying to buy up half the county for a resort development. Margaret lived in the one property they couldn't acquire, your property. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Sarah sank into the worn leather chair across from Morrison's desk, her mind reeling. "So they killed people to get it?" 3 witnesses died in accidents over 6 months. Margaret went into hiding after the second death. Morrison's eyes were grave. She knew she was next. Sarah's phone buzzed against the wooden desk. A text from an unknown number made her blood freeze. "Stop digging or Emma pays the price. You have 24 hours? Morrison saw her face go white and leaned forward. "What is it?" With shaking fingers, Sarah showed him the message. The detective's expression hardened as he grabbed his radio. "This is Morrison. I need units at 428 Maple Street immediately. Possible kidnapping threat. Emma's at my neighbor's house," Sarah whispered, already reaching for her jacket. "Mrs. Chen watches her when I can't be there." They raced through the empty streets as Morrison coordinated with dispatch. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, each second stretching into eternity. The money felt like a curse now, tainted with blood and death. She would burn every dollar if it meant keeping Emma safe. Mrs. Chen's house stood dark and silent, the morning newspaper still lying on the front steps. Morrison drew his weapon as they approached the front door, his training taking over. Sarah's knock echoed loudly in the pre-dawn stillness. "Mrs. Chen?" Sarah called out, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "It's Sarah. Is everything okay?" No answer. Morrison tried the door handle, unlocked. They stepped into the foyer, and Sarah immediately knew something was wrong. Mrs. Chen's reading glasses lay broken on the hardwood floor, and a dining room chair was overturned. "Emma!" Sarah shouted, abandoning caution as she rushed through the house. Morrison followed, clearing each room methodically. The house was empty except for Mrs. Chen's cat, who meowed plaintively from beneath the kitchen table. In the living room, Morrison found a note taped to the television screen. Sarah read it over his shoulder, her vision blurring with tears. "The old woman is safe. Your daughter too, for now. Bring the money to the Treehouse at midnight. Come alone, or they both die." "We'll get them back," Morrison said firmly, but Sarah could see the worry in his eyes. "I'm calling in backup, setting up surveillance." "No." Sarah's voice was steel. "They said, come alone. I won't risk Emma's life. Sarah, these people have already killed. They won't hesitate to." "Then I'll give them what they want." She turned to face him, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. "The money isn't worth my daughter's life." Morrison's radio crackled to life. "Detective, we found an abandoned van on Old Mill Road. Elderly Asian female and young girl, both unconscious but breathing. Paramedics en route." Relief flooded through Sarah so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. "They're alive? Looks like they were drugged," came the voice over the radio. "But they're stable." Morrison holstered his weapon, but his expression remained grim. "This was a warning, Sarah. They wanted to show you they could get to anyone, anytime." As they drove toward the hospital, Sarah stared out at the familiar landscape that no longer felt like home. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every stranger could be an enemy. The treehouse that had seemed like salvation now felt like a trap, its secrets demanding a price she wasn't sure she could pay. "What happens at midnight?" she asked quietly. Morrison's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. "We end this, but we do it smart, with backup and a plan." Sarah nodded, but privately she was already making her own plans. If someone wanted the money badly enough to drug an innocent old woman and her daughter, they weren't going to stop until they had it. The only question was whether Sarah could survive handing it over. The hospital loomed ahead, and Sarah prepared herself for the most important decision of her life. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline morning that made everything look deceptively peaceful. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at the business card Detective Morrison had left behind. The edges were already worn from her nervous handling. Emma bounded down the stairs, backpack slung over one shoulder, completely oblivious to the tension that had consumed their home for the past week. "Mom, you look terrible. Did you sleep at all?" Sarah managed a weak smile. "Just thinking about some grown-up stuff, honey. Are you ready for school? Can we go to the treehouse after? I want to show Lily the cool rope ladder." Emma's enthusiasm felt like a knife twist in Sarah's chest. How could she explain that their magical discovery had turned into something dangerous? "We'll see. Maybe we should take a break from the treehouse for a while." Emma's face fell. "But why? Did I do something wrong? Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nice chat with the detective yesterday. Hope you made the right choice. Check your mailbox. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Someone had been watching. They knew about Morrison's visit, which meant they were closer than she'd imagined. She forced her expression to remain neutral as Emma watched her with growing concern. Mom, you're scaring me. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Go brush your teeth. Sarah waited until Emma disappeared upstairs before creeping to the front window. The mailbox sat innocuously at the end of their driveway, but approaching it felt like walking into a trap. She grabbed her jacket and stepped outside, scanning the neighboring houses and parked cars for any sign of surveillance. Everything looked normal, too normal, the kind of staged normalcy that made her skin crawl. Inside the mailbox, nestled between bills and advertisements, was a manila envelope with no return address. Her name was typed on a simple white label. Sarah's hands shook as she tore it open. The contents made her stomach drop. Photographs of Emma walking to school, playing in their backyard, climbing the treehouse ladder. Each image was taken with a telephoto lens from various angles and distances. Professional surveillance photos that spoke of patience and planning. At the bottom of the stack was a note, "Your daughter is beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to her. The money stays buried. The detective gets nothing. You have 24 hours to convince him this was all a misunderstanding." Sarah's legs nearly gave out. She clutched the mailbox post, fighting waves of nausea and rage. These people had been watching Emma, photographing her like she was a target. The violation felt absolute, choking. "Mom?" Emma's voice carried from the front door. "The bus is coming." Sarah shoved the photos into her jacket and forced herself to walk normally back to the house. Emma stood on the porch with her backpack, looking confused by her mother's strange behavior. "Have a good day at school," Sarah said, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug. "You're acting really weird," Emma mumbled against her shoulder, but she hugged back just as tightly. The school bus rounded the corner, its yellow bulk both comforting and terrifying. Sarah watched Emma climb aboard and take her usual seat by the window. As the bus pulled away, Emma waved from behind the glass, her smile bright and trusting. Sarah waited until the bus disappeared before pulling out her phone to call Detective Morrison. It rang once before she hung up. The photographs had made the stakes brutally clear. One wrong move and Emma would pay the price. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. These people had already killed Great-Aunt Helen, and Sarah had stumbled into the crosshairs by pure accident. They wouldn't let her walk away, not when she knew about the money. The temporary reprieve was just that, temporary. She needed leverage, something that would make her more valuable alive than dead. Back in the house, Sarah spread the photographs across her kitchen table like a grim puzzle. The angles suggested multiple surveillance points, which meant either several people or someone with significant resources and patience. The quality was professional grade, not the work of casual criminals. One photo caught her attention, a shot of the treehouse taken from an elevated position. The photographer had been in another tree or possibly on a roof. She studied the angle carefully, trying to determine the vantage point. Her laptop was still open on the counter from her late-night research. Sarah pulled up satellite images of her property and the surrounding area, comparing them to the photograph's perspective. The shot had been taken from the Hendersons' property next door, probably from their second-story window or roof. The Hendersons were snowbirds, gone to Florida until spring. Their house had been empty for months, which made it perfect for surveillance operations. Sarah wondered how long someone had been using it as a base, watching her and Emma go about their daily lives. Her phone rang, making her jump. Morrison's name appeared on the screen. "I was expecting your call," he said without preamble. "We need to talk." The sound of gravel crunching under tires made Sarah's blood freeze. She pressed herself against the kitchen window, peering through the gap in the curtains as headlights swept across the driveway. The digital clock on the microwave glowed 11:47 p.m. Nobody made innocent visits at this hour. "Emma, wake up." she whispered urgently, shaking her daughter's shoulder. "We need to go, now." Emma stirred groggily. "What's wrong, Mommy?" "Just trust me, baby. Put on your shoes, the ones by the door." Sarah's hands trembled as she grabbed the manila envelope containing the bank documents and stuffed it into her jacket pocket. Through the window, she watched two figures emerge from a dark SUV. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other moved with a predatory grace that made her stomach clench. The back door was their only option. Sarah scooped up Emma and crept through the darkened house, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. Behind them she heard the soft scrape of metal on metal, someone picking the front lock. They slipped out into the night air, and Sarah immediately regretted not grabbing coats. The October wind cut through her thin sweater like ice water. Emma whimpered softly against her shoulder. "Shh, we're playing a quiet game," Sarah breathed into her daughter's ear. "Like hide and seek." The treehouse loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the star-scattered sky. It wasn't ideal, but the ladder would be difficult for grown men to climb quietly, and from up there she could see anyone approaching. More importantly, she'd hidden Detective Morrison's card in the treehouse earlier, thinking it was the last place anyone would look. Sarah tested the first rung with her weight, then began climbing one-handed while Emma clung to her neck. Every creak of wood sounded deafening in the stillness. Halfway up, she heard voices from inside the house, harsh whispers that carried through the thin walls. "She was here recently. Coffee's still warm. Check upstairs. I'll take the basement." Sarah pulled them both through the treehouse entrance and immediately felt around in the dark corner where she'd wedged the detective's card behind a loose board. Her fingers found it just as a flashlight beam swept across the yard below. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped it twice before managing to dial Morrison's number. It rang once, twice. "Morrison." "It's Sarah Chen," she whispered, barely breathing the words. "They're here, at the house. I'm in the treehouse with Emma, but—" "Stay exactly where you are." Morrison's voice was instantly alert. "I'm 20 minutes out. Do not move, do not make a sound." The line went dead, and Sarah clutched Emma closer. Below, the back door opened and two figures emerged into the yard. One carried a tactical flashlight that carved harsh white circles across the ground. "Footprints," the shorter man said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Leading to the tree." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't thought about leaving tracks in the damp earth. "Well, well," the taller man called up toward the treehouse. "Mrs. Chen, we know you're up there. Why don't you save us all some trouble and come down? We just want to talk." Emma shifted restlessly in Sarah's arms, and Sarah pressed her hand gently over her daughter's mouth. The 4-year-old's eyes were wide with fear, but she remained silent. "We know about the money," the voice continued, taking on a reasonable, almost friendly tone. "And we know you've been asking questions. But here's the thing, that money belongs to people who've been very patient. Now their patience is running out." The flashlight beam probed the treehouse entrance, and Sarah pressed herself back into the deepest corner, pulling Emma with her. Wooden planks and shadow were their only protection. "You have a beautiful little girl," the shorter man added, and ice flooded Sarah's veins. "Be a shame if something happened to her because Mommy made poor choices." Rage flared hot in Sarah's chest, temporarily overwhelming her fear. How dare they threaten Emma? But she forced herself to remain motionless, counting the minutes until Morrison would arrive. Below, she heard the creak of weight on the ladder's bottom rung. "Boss, I don't like climbing in the dark. What if she's armed? She's a single mother hiding in a treehouse at midnight. She's terrified, not dangerous." Another creak, closer now. Sarah could hear the man's breathing, labored with exertion. Her mind raced through impossible scenarios. She could try to kick the ladder away, but that would mean moving toward the entrance and exposing both her and Emma. Then Emma did something that made Sarah's heart stop. She started to cough, the dry, persistent cough that always preceded her asthma attacks. The climbing sounds stopped immediately. "Well, hello there." The man's voice drifted up, much closer now. Why don't you and Mummy come down and we can all be friends? In the distance, Sarah heard the faint wail of sirens, but they sounded impossibly far away. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the forest as Sarah pressed her back against the treehouse wall, clutching Emma's trembling hand. Heavy boots thundered up the rope ladder, each creak of the wooden rungs marking another second closer to capture. "There's nowhere to run now, Sarah," Marcus called from below, his voice carrying the cold authority she'd once found so reassuring. "Just come down peacefully, and we can work this out." Emma whimpered, and Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand twice, their old signal for stay quiet. Through the treehouse's small window, she could see flashlight beams sweeping the ground below, like predatory eyes searching for prey. Detective Rodriguez had been right about Marcus. The realization hit her like ice water. How many conversations had she had with him about the case? How much had she unknowingly revealed? Every sympathetic nod, every concerned question about her safety had been reconnaissance. "Mom, I'm scared," Emma whispered, barely audible. Sarah's mind raced through their options. The treehouse sat 30 feet above ground with only one way down, the ladder Marcus was now climbing. But Aunt Lydia had been clever, paranoid even. There had to be something else, some escape route only she would know about. The boards beneath them groaned under Marcus's weight as he reached the platform. Sarah felt along the walls desperately, her fingers searching for anything, a hidden panel, a secret door. Then she remembered the journal entry about the bird's path to safety. Her hand found it. A rope concealed behind loose bark on the far side of the treehouse. It was nearly invisible in the darkness, but when she tugged, it held firm. A zip line, strung between the massive oak and another tree 40 yards away. "Sarah, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Marcus's voice was directly below the trapdoor now. "The money's already gone. My associates moved it this afternoon while you were playing detective." The betrayal cut deep, but there was no time for anger. Sarah helped Emma climb onto the windowsill, wrapping her daughter's small hands around the rope's handle. "Remember when we went ziplining at camp? Just like that, but quieter." Emma's eyes were wide with terror, but she nodded. The sound of the trapdoor creaking open made them both freeze. "Go," Sarah whispered, and gave Emma a gentle push. Her daughter disappeared into the darkness, sliding silently along the rope toward the distant tree. Sarah counted to 5, then grabbed the second handle she'd found hanging beside the first. "What the hell?" Marcus's head appeared through the trapdoor just as Sarah swung out into the void. The forest floor rushed past below her, branches whipping at her face as she flew through the canopy. Behind her, she heard Marcus shouting orders to someone on the ground. A flashlight beam caught her for a split second before she reached the landing platform, a small wooden deck built around the trunk of another oak. Emma was waiting, tears streaming down her face but unharmed. The platform connected to a narrow walkway that spiraled down around the tree trunk. Lydia had built an entire escape route through the canopy. "This way, baby," Sarah whispered, leading Emma down the winding path. They were halfway to the ground when the first gunshot shattered the night air. The bullet splintered bark inches from Sarah's head, sending wood chips flying. She pushed Emma ahead of her, both of them moving as fast as they dared on the narrow walkway. Another shot. Then Marcus's voice, closer now. "She's got another way down. Circle around to the north side." The walkway ended at a rope ladder that dropped to within 8 feet of the ground. Sarah went first, then caught Emma as her daughter jumped the final distance. They landed in a tangle of arms and legs on the forest floor, but they were down. "Which way?" Emma gasped. Sarah oriented herself, remembering the map from Lydia's journal. The old woman had marked multiple escape routes, but only one led directly to the road where Rodriguez might still be waiting. They ran through the underbrush, branches tearing at their clothes. Behind them, flashlights bobbed like angry fireflies as Marcus's men spread through the forest. Sarah could hear at least 3 different voices coordinating the search. Her phone had 1 bar of signal. She typed quickly as they ran. "Marcus is one of them. At Treehouse. Help!" The message failed to send. They broke through a line of dense shrubs and found themselves on a dirt trail. Sarah recognized it from her earlier explorations. It led to the old logging road where she'd first met Marcus. The irony wasn't lost on her. Emma stumbled, exhausted. "I can't run anymore." Sarah scooped her up, adrenaline giving her strength she didn't know she possessed. The trail ahead curved toward the main road, but between them and safety lay 200 yards of open ground where they'd be completely exposed. Behind them, the voices were getting closer. The abandoned warehouse loomed before them like a concrete tomb, its broken windows staring down at Sarah with hollow menace. Detective Mills cut the engine, and the sudden silence felt oppressive. Through the cracked windshield, Sarah could see Tommy's small figure pressed against a grimy window on the second floor, his face pale with terror. "Remember the plan," Mills whispered, checking his service weapon one final time. "I go in first, create a distraction. You wait exactly 3 minutes, then use the service entrance on the east side. Find Tommy and get him out." Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the burner phone they'd rigged to call 911 with a single button press. What if something goes wrong? It won't. His eyes met hers, steady and determined. "We're getting your boy back." Mills slipped from the car like a shadow, disappearing around the building's corner. Sarah watched the digital clock on the dashboard, each second crawling by with agonizing slowness. 2 minutes. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 2:30. She could hear muffled voices from inside the warehouse now, though she couldn't make out words. 2:50. The service door was exactly where Mills had said it would be, hidden behind a dumpster and partially concealed by overgrown weeds. Sarah tested the handle, unlocked. She eased it open, wincing at the soft creak of rusted hinges. The warehouse interior was a maze of abandoned machinery and storage containers, creating pools of shadow in the dim afternoon light, filtering through broken skylights. Sarah moved carefully between towering shelves of forgotten inventory, following the sound of voices that grew clearer with each step. "Told you this would happen if you kept digging," a man was saying. Sarah recognized the voice, Richard Thornton, her great-aunt's lawyer, the man who'd seemed so helpful, so concerned about her welfare. The money was never supposed to surface. 20 years I've kept that secret," came another voice, rougher, unfamiliar. 20 years of waiting for my cut while you lived high on the hog. Now the kid inherits everything and suddenly you want to clean house?" Sarah crept closer, using a stack of moldering cardboard boxes as cover. Through a gap between them she could see Tommy sitting on a wooden crate, his wrists bound but otherwise unharmed. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by fresh terror. 3 men stood around him, Thornton, a burly stranger in work clothes, and impossibly Deputy Marshal Hayes, the federal agent who'd claimed to be investigating the money laundering. "Hayes was supposed to contain the situation," Thornton continued, his usual polished demeanor cracked with stress. "Instead, he's been feeding information to that detective." Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "Mills is getting too close. He's connected the offshore accounts to your law firm. It's only a matter of time before—" A loud crash echoed from the front of the warehouse, followed by Mills' voice shouting, "Police! Nobody move!" The 3 men sprang into action. Thornton grabbed Tommy, hauling him to his feet while the burly stranger, who Sarah now realized must be Frank Morrison, the mysterious fourth partner, pulled a gun from his jacket. Hayes was already moving toward the sound of the disturbance, his own weapon drawn. This was her chance. Sarah darted from her hiding spot, making it halfway to Tommy before Thornton spotted her. Well, mother's intuition or just stupidity. He tightened his grip on Tommy, who struggled against his bonds. "Frank, it seems our little inheritance problem just walked right to us." Morrison swung his gun toward Sarah, his finger tightening on the trigger. Time slowed to a crawl. She dove sideways, crashing into a stack of paint cans that toppled with a tremendous clatter. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space, the bullet sparking off concrete where she'd been standing a heartbeat before. "Mom!" Tommy's cry cut through her like a knife. More gunshots from the front of the building, shouting. Sarah rolled behind an overturned table, her mind racing. Hayes had betrayed Mills. The detective could be walking into a trap, if he wasn't already dead. The thought sent ice through her veins. "You can't run forever, Sarah," Thornton called out, his cultured voice echoing strangely in the vast space. "Your great-aunt tried. Look how that ended. She killed Martha?" Sarah couldn't help herself. Martha got greedy, started asking questions about money that didn't belong to her, about partners she'd never met. Thornton's laugh was bitter. She was going to expose everything. 20 years of careful planning, decades of skimmed funds and falsified records, all for some misguided notion of honesty. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the air, distant but growing closer. Morrison cursed viciously. "You said you'd handled the cops." "I did handle them." Hayes's voice carried from the front of the building. "Except for Mills. He's down, but he got a signal out somehow." Sarah's blood turned to ice water. Mills was hurt, maybe worse. And those sirens might not be the cavalry. They might be more dirty cops coming to clean up the mess. She was truly alone now. The screech of brakes on gravel made Sarah's blood freeze. Through the kitchen window, she watched a black sedan pull into her driveway, its tinted windows reflecting the late afternoon sun like dark mirrors. Marcus was supposed to be in custody. The realization hit her like ice water. Whoever was in that car wasn't here to help. "Emma, get upstairs. Now." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, but something in her tone made her daughter drop her coloring book without question. "Mummy? Go to your room and lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you, okay?" Sarah forced a smile that felt like broken glass on her face. "It's just a game." Emma's footsteps pounded up the stairs as Sarah grabbed the cordial phone from the kitchen counter. Dead. The line had been cut. 2 car doors slammed in quick succession. Through the window, Sarah saw them. A woman in an expensive coat and a man built like a linebacker, both moving with the casual confidence of people who'd done this before. The woman had silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that seemed to catalogue everything they touched. Sarah recognized her immediately from the newspaper clipping she'd found in Aunt Cordelia's papers. Victoria Brennan, Marcus's business partner and the real power behind their operation. Sarah's mind raced through her options. The back door led to open yard, no cover. The basement had the old coal chute, but it would take too long to reach. The treehouse was too far. She was trapped. The front door handle turned slowly. They weren't even pretending this was a social call. Sarah pressed herself against the wall beside the kitchen doorway, clutching the cast-iron skillet she'd grabbed from the stove. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain they could hear it from outside. "Sarah Chen?" Victoria's voice carried the cultured tones of old money and new menace. "We know you're here. Your car's in the driveway." Footsteps crossed the living room, deliberate and unhurried. They were taking their time, savoring her fear. "We also know about your little treasure hunt. Very impressive, really. Cordelia always was cleverer than we gave her credit for." Victoria's laugh was like wind chimes in a storm. "But I'm afraid playtime is over." The refrigerator hummed. A board creaked overhead, Emma moving around upstairs. Sarah prayed her daughter would stay hidden. "Here's what's going to happen," Victoria continued, her voice growing closer. "You're going to show us where Cordelia hid our property. All of it. Then you're going to sign some papers transferring ownership of this delightful little property to a shell company I happen to control. Everyone wins." Sarah caught a glimpse of the man. Thick neck, dead eyes, hands that looked like they could snap bones. He was checking the windows, closing the blinds. They were planning to be here for a while. "Of course," Victoria added conversationally, "if you choose to be difficult, well, accidents happen. Especially to single mothers who stick their noses where they don't belong." Rage flared in Sarah's chest, burning away some of the fear. How dare this woman threaten Emma? How dare she waltz into their home and act like she owned the place? But anger wouldn't save them. Sarah needed to be smart. "I'm in the kitchen," she called out, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I'll come out, just don't hurt my daughter." Much better. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Though I should mention, my associate has already taken the liberty of disabling your car. And your nearest neighbor is what? Half a mile away? Even if someone heard you scream, help would arrive far too late. The man loomed behind Victoria, blocking the only exit. Sarah kept the skillet hidden against her leg. 23 years, Victoria said, studying Sarah like a bug under glass. 23 years we've been looking for what Cordelia stole from us. Did she tell you the whole story before she died? About how she worked for us, laundering money through that precious foundation of hers? About how she got greedy? Sarah shook her head. She died when I was 7. I never knew her. Pity. I would have liked to thank her personally for the trouble she's caused. Victoria stepped closer, and Sarah caught the scent of expensive perfume and something else, something cold and chemical. $3.7 million, plus 23 years of compound interest. That's quite a nest egg, don't you think? A board creaked overhead again, louder this time. Victoria's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. Your daughter has excellent timing. Richard, why don't you go upstairs and introduce yourself? Make sure she understands the importance of staying quiet. The man started toward the stairs, and something broke inside Sarah. She'd run from too many things in her life, debt, disappointment, failure. But she wouldn't run from this, couldn't run from this. She swung the skillet with everything she had. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the forest as Detective Morrison's team surrounded the treehouse. Sarah pressed herself against the trunk, her breath coming in short gasps while Emma clung to her side. Below them she could hear voices, urgent, commanding, but couldn't make out the words over the blood rushing in her ears. "Mom, I'm scared," Emma whispered. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. "I know, baby. Just stay quiet a little longer." Through the gaps in the wooden planks, she watched Marcus emerge from behind a cluster of pine trees, his hands raised in surrender. Even from this distance, she could see the resignation in his posture, the way his shoulders sagged as officers moved in to restrain him. But something felt wrong. Marcus had been desperate enough to threaten them, to chase them through the woods with a gun, yet now he was giving up without a fight? Sarah's instincts, honed by months of looking over her shoulder and questioning everyone's motives, screamed that this wasn't over. A new voice cut through the chaos below, smooth, authoritative, familiar. Sarah's blood turned to ice as Mayor Patricia Henley stepped into view, speaking rapidly to Detective Morrison. From her elevated position, Sarah couldn't hear the conversation, but she could read the body language. Henley was taking charge, directing the officers, pointing toward different areas of the woods. Morrison nodded and began dispatching his team in the directions Henley indicated, away from the treehouse. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Henley had arrived too quickly, knew exactly where to send the search teams, was systematically misdirecting the investigation. She wasn't here to help. She was here to finish what Marcus had started. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. With trembling fingers, she checked it. "Stay exactly where you are. Do not come down until I give the all clear. Detective Morrison." But Morrison was 50 yards away, talking animatedly with Henley. He hadn't sent that text. Another message appeared. "The girl stays up there with you. Insurance." Sarah's hands shook as she deleted the messages and powered off the phone. Emma looked at her with wide, questioning eyes. "We need to move," Sarah whispered. Very, very quietly. The treehouse had seemed like salvation when they'd first climbed up, but now it felt like a trap. There was only one way down, and Henley controlled it. Sarah scanned their surroundings, noting the thick branches that extended toward neighboring trees. Some looked sturdy enough to support their weight, but with Emma. Below, she heard Henley's voice rising slightly. "I think I saw movement over by the old logging road. They might be trying to circle back to the main house." More footsteps retreated into the distance. Sarah made her decision. She gathered the evidence she'd been clutching, the photographs, the documents that proved her great-aunt's murder, the connections to the money laundering operation that had funded half the town's recent development projects. She stuffed them into her jacket pocket, then turned to Emma. "Remember when you climbed across the monkey bars at school? This is going to be like that, but with tree branches." Emma's eyes widened. "Mom, that's really high." "I know, but I'll go first. and I'll be right there to catch you." Sarah tested the nearest branch, a thick oak limb that stretched toward the neighboring maple. It felt solid. She swung her leg over, straddling it, then began to inch her way across. The bark scraped against her palms, and twice she had to stop when smaller branches cracked ominously. But she made it to the maple. "Your turn, sweetheart." "Just like I did." Emma hesitated for only a moment before following. She was lighter, more agile, and made the crossing with the fearless grace of childhood. Sarah caught her as she reached the maple and held her close for a precious second. They repeated the process twice more, moving from tree to tree, always staying high above the ground. Sarah's arms burned from the exertion, and her legs were scraped raw from the bark, but they were putting distance between themselves and the treehouse. Finally, they reached a massive pine near the edge of the woods. Its branches extended close to the roof of a small maintenance shed behind the local fire station. Sarah had never been so grateful to see civilization. They dropped onto the shed roof with a soft thud, then slid down to the ground. Sarah immediately pulled out her phone and dialed 911, but instead of asking for the police, she requested the State Bureau of Investigation. "This is Sarah Chen. I need to report corruption in the Millbrook Police Department and the mayor's office. I have evidence of money laundering, murder, and conspiracy." While she spoke, she kept Emma close, scanning the tree line. They'd escaped the immediate trap, but Henley was still out there, still orchestrating the search, and now Sarah realized the terrifying truth. They weren't just running from one desperate man trying to protect a secret. They were running from an entire network of corruption that reached to the very top of their small town's power structure. The abandoned warehouse echoed with their footsteps as Sarah clutched Emma's hand, following Detective Martinez deeper into the shadows. The frozen fortune, $3 million in untraceable bills, sat heavy in the duffel bag slung across her shoulder, a weight that had already cost too many lives. "This ends tonight," Martinez whispered, checking his weapon one final time. "Vincent's crew thinks they're meeting your aunt's old partner here. They have no idea we've been tracking their communications." Sarah's phone buzzed. Another threatening message, but she ignored it. After weeks of running, of looking over her shoulder, of watching Emma flinch at every unexpected sound, she was done being prey. The treehouse seemed like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 3 weeks since she'd first climbed those wooden rungs and discovered the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. 3 weeks since she'd learned that Great-Aunt Margaret hadn't been the eccentric recluse everyone believed, but a woman who'd stumbled onto a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the city's elite. A car door slammed outside, then another. "They're here," Martinez said, motioning for Sarah and Emma to take position behind a stack of shipping containers. "Remember, once we have Vincent's confession recorded, you run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. My backup will be in position." But Sarah had spotted the second set of headlights approaching from the opposite direction, and her blood ran cold. "Detective, we've been set up." Martinez spun around just as the warehouse's main lights blazed to life, flooding the space with harsh fluorescent glare. Vincent emerged from behind a concrete pillar, flanked by 2 armed men, but it was the figure stepping out of the shadows behind him that made Sarah's breath catch. Captain Reeves, Martinez's own superior. "I really hoped it wouldn't come to this, Detective," Reeves said, his voice carrying easily across the empty space. "You should have left well enough alone when I suggested you drop the case." Martinez's hand moved toward his weapon, but Vincent's men were already aiming at him. "Sir, you're involved in this?" "Involved?" Reeves laughed bitterly. "Son, I've been cleaning up Margaret Thompson's mess for 20 years. That woman saw something she shouldn't have, took something that wasn't hers, and then had the audacity to hide it away like some kind of insurance policy." Sarah stepped forward, surprising everyone, including herself. She was protecting it. "She knew you'd killed the others who tried to expose the money laundering operation. Smart woman, your aunt. Too bad she passed that particular gene along." Vincent raised his gun, pointing it directly at Emma, who pressed closer to her mother's side. The warehouse fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic. Sarah could feel Emma trembling against her, could see Martinez calculating angles and distances, could sense the weight of 20 years of corruption and violence hanging in the air like smoke. "Here's what's going to happen," Reeves continued. "You're going to hand over that bag, and then there's going to be a tragic accident. A detective who got too close to a dangerous smuggling operation, a single mother who got caught in the crossfire, and the child," Martinez asked quietly. The pause that followed told Sarah everything she needed to know. She thought of Margaret, alone in her treehouse, documenting evidence and hiding it away because she knew no one else would listen. She thought of all the nights she'd worked double shifts just to keep the lights on, all the times she'd felt powerless against forces bigger than herself. But she wasn't powerless now. "Emma," she whispered, "when I say run, you go straight to that red exit sign. Don't stop, don't look back." Before anyone could react, Sarah hurled the duffel bag high into the air, money scattered like confetti, as Vincent's men instinctively tracked the movement, and in that split second of distraction, Martinez drew his weapon. "Run!" Emma bolted toward the exit as gunshots erupted behind her. Sarah dove behind the shipping containers, her ears ringing, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She heard Martinez shout, heard Vincent curse, heard Reeves calling for backup on his radio. But then she heard something else, sirens growing closer. Martinez's real backup, the federal agents he'd contacted without telling his corrupt superior, were finally arriving. Through a gap in the containers, Sarah saw Reeves's face change from confident control to desperate panic as the warehouse doors burst open and armed figures in FBI jackets flooded in. 20 minutes later, as paramedics checked Emma for injuries and agents led Reeves and Vincent away in handcuffs, Sarah found herself sitting on the warehouse steps, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "It's over," Martinez said, settling beside her with his arm in a sling. Sarah nodded, thinking of the treehouse waiting for them, no longer a hiding place, but finally, truly, a home. "Yes," she whispered, "it is."